Hi, welcome back to our podcast. So, today we're going to talk about something that we've seen an increasing interest over the past few years, and that is Colombia. So, not just as a talent market, but also as a place where international companies are starting to build their teams.
Yes, and especially from companies that want to operate or hire in Colombia, but don't necessarily want to open a legal entity or hire directly.
Exactly. So, today we'll explain why Colombia is attracting international companies. What is an employer of record? Why are companies even using that model? What employment rules looks like in Colombia, what it costs, and how our onboarding process really looks like.
Hmm? So let's start with the big question. Like, why Colombia? Why are so many international companies looking to hire in Colombia?
Yeah. So I think there are a few structural reasons. First is geography and time zone. Colombia is very well aligned with North America and has a reasonable overlap with Europe. So for companies that are operating internationally, this matters more than people might think. So it really allows this real-time collaboration.
Yeah, very true. And if you compare, for example, with Asia, if you are based in North America, you don't have those extreme time differences. You can actually have meetings during normal working hours throughout the day.
Exactly. And I also think Colombia has a very strong white collar talent pool. So they have a lot of engineers, marketing people, finance teams, operational roles. In addition to that, their English proficiency has really improved the last decade, I have to admit. So many professionals already are working with international companies.
Yes, yeah, very true. And another important point is the cost structure, because for small and medium-sized companies, it's very important to have predictable costs and also keep a good margin.
Absolutely. And when you include all employer contributions, Colombia still remains significantly more cost efficient compared to North America and Western Europe.
Yes, for sure. Um, so then we get to the next question, which we hear quite often actually, and that is, what exactly is an employer of record?
Yeah, I think the term is quite technical sounding. So, an employer of record, or EOR, is essentially a local legal employer on behalf of a foreign company. So, in simple terms, if a company in Germany or in the States or anywhere else wants to hire somebody in Colombia, but they don't have a legal entity, they can't actually legally employ that person. So, this is where EOR comes in.
Yes, and Globedesk, because we
Hmm.
become the legal employer for our clients in Colombia.
Exactly. Yes. So we handle the employment contract, the payroll, taxes, social security, pension, contributions, compliance with the Colombian labor law. But operationally, the employee works for the client.
Yes, so the client managed the daily work, performance, direction, and we Globedesk, we manage the legal structure and the compliance in Colombia.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, why don't companies just open their own entity in Colombia?
Yeah. I think there are just too many obligations starting a new entity. It means that you have to consider incorporation, tax registration, accounting obligation, legal representation, and ongoing compliance. So if you're hiring just one or two people or a few more, that structure really doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And also, labor law in Colombia is very protective. It can be easy to make mistakes when it comes to compliance?
It really, really can. So, Colombian labor law is very much designed to protect the employee, like many countries. The termination rules, the severance structures, the mandatory bonuses, and the social contributions. But if you don't really understand that system, like you mentioned, mistakes are so easy to be made, right?
Mm.
So that's another reason for why companies prefer EOR. It really reduces risk.
Yeah, it does. And it also, for the clients, you are increased flexibility.
Hmm. Yes. So I guess to summarize, if a company wants to try the Colombian market, EOR really allows them to do that without building this permanent infrastructure to do so.
Mm. So let's talk about cost because that is what
Hmm.
all the clients are interested in. What can you share about costs in this scenario?
Yeah. Yes. So I think the biggest misunderstanding is that company look only at gross salary. So in Colombia, the true employer costs really include the social security, pension, health insurance, risk assurance, severance accrual, and mandatory bonuses. So actually, employer cost is typically 40 to 50% above gross salary when everything is included.
Yeah. And this actually surprised many of the companies and clients that we talk to.
Yeah, it really does. And even though these contributions, total cost is still usually significantly lower than hiring in the US or Western Europe. So the key here is to get the whole picture from the beginning.
Yeah. What would you say are some employment rules that international companies should be aware of when they are thinking about hiring in Colombia?
Yeah, I think one important point is the indefinite contracts. They are standard. Permanent employment is the norm. So fixed term contracts exist, but they have to follow really specific regulations. So another important factor is the mandatory bonuses. Employees receive what is often called 13th salary. So that is paid in two installments over the year, right? So one in June and one in December.
Yes. And then we also have severance to think about.
Yes, and severance is accrued actually during employment and must be handled really carefully. It's not something that you calculate only at the termination, so it's structured throughout the employment period. Overall, the system is very protective, and this is why compliance and correct structure is super critical, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, very true. Let's talk a little bit of what kind of roles that we typically support for our clients.
Yeah. So we work with a wide range of roles and sectors, actually. I think that's the real beauty of EOR. So we're looking at sectors in engineering, data, marketing, operations, customer success. All of these professionals are working remotely from Colombia to international companies.
Hmm? And how is the onboarding process? How does it work when a company decides that they want to hire in Colombia and they move forward with Globedesk? What can they expect from us?
Hmm. Yeah. So first, we always share a total salary cost breakdown so the client understands all the mandatory costs of an employee. We will explain that salary breakdown very clearly. So, as we have already mentioned earlier, transparency is something that's very important for us. So, once that is fully clear, we will have an employment contract that we draft up, and then thirdly, we will register that employee in all the mandatory systems. So, social security, pension, healthcare, etc. And then finally, we will implement payroll.
Yeah. Yeah, and Globedesk remains the legal employer throughout the employment period. We also support both the client and the employee during this whole time. And our goal is to make it predictable and structured for international companies. Operating in a new country shouldn't feel chaotic for them. And maybe we can also share a quick example. Recently, we worked with a European SaaS company, and they wanted to hire a senior developer in Colombia.
Yes, and actually, they initiated conversations with us, thinking that they wanted to open their own entity actually in Colombia. But once we explained EOR and its structure, they realized they could hire almost immediately without setting up a company itself.
Mm, yes. And we handle the employment contract, the payroll setup, and compliance. And now the employee works fully integrated with the client's engineering team.
Exactly. And the company avoided months of legal setup, right? And admin costs. I think this is the perfect situation where EOR really makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And why do companies choose to work with Globedesk when there are so many EOR providers on the market?
Hmm. I think that's a really fair question. And I think one important reason is that we work very closely with companies throughout the process. Many large EOR platforms, they're very automated, right? So when you enter a new country like Colombia, companies usually need real guidance. They want to understand the employment rules, the real cost structure, and the implications before they hire.
Yeah, very true. And we spend a lot of time with new clients to explain all these kind of details, and we try to make the process as simple as possible for the client.
Hmm. Yeah. And our goal is that the company will can at that moment on focus completely on their team, managing their work while we take care of the legal employment structure.
Yeah, for sure. So to summarize, Colombia offers strong talent. It has competitive cost structures, and it's also a strategic positioning for international companies to hire in Colombia. If you are exploring Colombia and want to understand what it would look like in your specific case when hiring in Colombia, then we are always open for a conversation. And if you, as a listener, found this interesting, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more conversations. And until next time, ciao.
Until next time, bye.